The first thing that we taught your dog was eye contact. But in order to teach that or train that, you first have to understand the system of training that we use to teach quite literally everything. So the system of communication that is generally used in most dog training is referred to as marker training. Marker training, put very simply, is when you are making a noise, generally a word, to mark the behavior that your dog just did as good or bad, right or wrong. So if your dog sits, when they sit, you would mark that behavior with the word good. If they do something wrong, you would mark that behavior with the word no. And these are the most common markers people use. So it sounds very simple because almost everybody already says something like that, like good boy, good girl, no, right? So it sounds very simple, but it isn't. And if you really understand marker training and you understand how to use it very efficiently, you will train your dog significantly easier and faster than you would otherwise. Before I go into all that, I do want to touch on some common practices that are generally done in dog training that we actually avoid. These are things that most trainers do, most dog owners do, we personally did, I did, and struggled to fix. You need to be aware of these things because they can all be relatively problematic, right? So some of the most common things, the only markers most people use are good for everything good, no for everything bad, and then most people have a release word, a release marker to release their dog from a stay command, right? So they might say stay, they'll put their bowl of food down on the floor and release them by saying, okay, and the dog is free to go, right? They open the back door, the dog sits and waits for permission, okay, the dog runs out. This is a very, very common use of basic markers. Another super common practice is the use of hand signals with all of the commands. This is what most people do in the beginning of their dog training journey because hand signals are significantly easier to teach than verbal commands. Dogs don't understand what we're talking about. They do not have a verbal language with their own species, so our words really don't mean anything. You are conditioning them to respond with a specific behavior or action when you make a specific sound. So they don't understand the inherent meaning of the word sit. You're just conditioning them to respond to that sound in a certain way, right? But they can read your body language better than we can read each other. So hand signals are super easy to teach. So most people will use hand signals like sit, down, stay, come. These are very, very common things. Another super common practice is to only reward your dog once per command, which makes sense because we only reward each other once per job, right? You only get paid one time per job. So when you go to work, you only get paid once for what you did. So sit, good, one treat. Down, good, one treat. Come, good, one treat. It makes sense to only give them one reward per command. Another common practice or belief is that you have to reward your dog as fast as humanly possible. So what we are usually taught or just believe on our own is that a dog's short-term memory is very, very, very bad. And it is. But because of that, we are taught that we need to reward them as fast as possible or they won't know why they got it. Most people are rewarding as fast as they can and rushing. And this is one of the most common practices that is actually extremely problematic for your actual training. Markers are technically the most simple form of verbal communication that you have with your dog. A command, in comparison to a marker, is significantly more advanced communication. A command is telling your dog that you want them to go do an action, right? So for place, if you say place, you want your dog to get up, walk across the room, get onto a bed that you designated by pointing to it, and they need to follow what you're pointing at, get onto the bed, stay there for an undisclosed amount of time until released. That's pretty advanced. Good just means I like that. So markers are very, very simple communication. Usually it gets paraphrased down to you're either telling them it's right or wrong, good or bad. All right. But the way that we train, good is used as our duration marker. So it's called a duration marker because it simply means good job, but keep going, almost like encouragement. So if I say sit, good, it means that was good, but keep sitting, right? Keep doing that. So yes is our terminal marker, meaning you did it, you're done doing that, come here so I can reward you. Now, this does not mean they're done training. It means they're done with that command. So if I say sit, the dog sits, good, they stay there. Maybe you want to remind them, 10 seconds later, good. So they stay there. 10 seconds later, good. So they stay there. 10 seconds later, yes. And they get up, run over, and you reward them for a job well done, right? Again, yes only means they completed that command. Now, you might not be using yes for your specific dog right now, but it's still very important to understand that for future training. As far as release markers go, most people say the word okay, and it makes sense why we naturally do that, because we naturally say okay to each other as a release marker. So in conversation with someone, you can say something like, oh, don't move, there's something on your shirt. Okay. Stay where you are. Okay. But we start a million sentences a day with the word okay. So when you send your dog to place and they get on that bed and they're waiting for that release, and you turn to your friend and go, okay, for dinner, your dog's going to come right off that place. You open the door to sign for that FedEx package and go, okay, and your dog runs right outside. So the word okay as a release marker is actually extremely dangerous. And I have personally been put in some very scary situations just because someone casually said, okay. So we don't like to use that. And if you did use it in the past, that's okay, but you're going to change it. You can change it to whatever you prefer, break, release. We personally say free, right? Because you don't naturally start a whole lot of conversations or sentences with the word free. So if you told your dog to sit or go to their place or lay down, and then you say free, they are free to go. You don't ever reward that, because the reward is that they're free to go. They don't have to stay there anymore, right? So if you were to put the bowl of food down and your dog was patiently waiting to eat, free, and they come over and eat. But because of these markers, we don't need the word stay. We do not need the word stay at all in our training, which is why we did not work on that with your dog. Stay is generally most dogs' worst command. It's usually their least reliable command. It also requires a lot of compulsion to teach. But you don't need to add a command to a command, which is already inherently confusing for your poor dog, because stay doesn't have one meaning. Sit, stay, down, stay, stand, stay, right? So if good already means to keep doing what you're doing, and you tell your dog down, good means to stay in a down. Sit, good, stay in a sit. But this is a much more easily understood and universal use of stay, because it means stay doing anything you're doing. So your dog can search for a ball that rolled into the leaves or the bushes, and as they're sniffing around, they turn back and look at you, they go back to searching, and you say, good, so they keep searching. It's a much more efficient version of stay, which also allows you to no longer waste your time on what is generally a very unreliable command. So just to recap, good is your duration marker, meaning good job, but keep going. Yes is your terminal marker, meaning you did that command, you're done with it, come here so I can reward you. Free is your release marker, meaning you are free to go. You never reward that. And no would be the negative marker, that is marking an unwanted behavior. It's marking something that they were not supposed to be doing, like jumping up on the counter, barking at somebody, etc. Hand signals. It makes sense to use them. It sounds great. They're very easy to teach. They also significantly outweigh your words. They will always have more value than your words. That is not a good thing. That's not a sales pitch for why you should use them. It's why you should not use them. We personally do not train dogs with hand signals ever, unless your dog is deaf. And then everything's a hand signal. But if they outweigh your words, the dog is really just relying on seeing the hand signals. So you're teaching sign language to a dog with phenomenal hearing, right? But if they have to see your hands in order to follow these commands, what hand signal do you use to get your dog to look at your hands when they're running away from you and they can't see your hands? So if you taught them come, and you put your hands in your pockets, your dog doesn't come. Sit. Now, in a 30-second session, it looks very impressive, because you can just do this and not say a word and your dog will sit every time. And where it becomes very obvious this is problematic is you put both your hands away and say sit, and the dog's reliability goes from 100% to 20%, right? Or You say sit and the dog sits, stand and the dog sits, down and the dog sits, come and the dog sits, because they're only following your hand signals, which further proves your words are now irrelevant. You can ask anybody who consistently uses hand signals, what do you do to wean your dog off of those hand signals? How do you fade them out? And watch the frustration grow on their face, because every experienced dog handler or trainer has fought that battle. So it'd be better to just not use them at all. But if you do use them, it's not the end of the world. Just stop using them. So 2 things to understand regarding hand signals: putting your hand out, everybody naturally stay, right? They put their hand out naturally when they don't want a dog approaching them. But you do that when you don't want anything approaching you. It's the natural animal instinct to create space between you and something you don't want crowding your space or approaching you. So the reason almost everybody naturally, without anyone teaching them to do this, puts their hand out when they give us, a stay command, or when a dog is rushing over to them, is because it's actually very effective. Now, we're not teaching the dog stay anyway, but it is very important to understand to put your hand out if you don't want that dog to keep following you, approaching you. You're getting charged by a neighbor's off-leash dog. Put your hand out. It's very, very effective. The other thing to understand is pointing. So it is very problematic and confusing to the poor dog when people point at the floor and say down. The ability to follow what we are pointing at is called joint attention. So a human can even follow what you're looking at. So I can look at something and you know what I'm looking at just from looking at my eyes. If I point at something, you know what I'm pointing at. We are sharing the attention and directing it at something specific. Dogs have that ability, which is pretty impressive because other animals don't. So when you're pointing at the floor for down, my own personal dog would run over, which is not what you said. You said down, so they should have laid down where they were. And they'd start checking out your foot or the ground, looking for whatever it is you're telling them to find on the floor when they lay down. But that's not what you told them. So you do want to use pointing, but use it appropriately when you want your dog to go to a specific place, to get a specific object, right? Place, go in your crate, get some water, get the ball. Teach your dog directionals. It's a pretty impressive thing, but only use that pointing intentionally. Do not tie it to a down command, which is very, very commonly done. So going to the 1 reward per command, we don't do that because if you use a one and done pay system, you get a one and done dog. We get paid when we're done with the job. Almost every job does that, right? You pay the mechanic when they're done with your car. You pay the dentist after the root canal. So when they're done, they get paid. When they're paid, they're done. These things go hand in hand, and there's nothing else coming after that. So when you pay someone for completing the job, they move on. Sit, good, 1 treat, there's nothing else coming, so the dog checks out. And you will get that problem pretty much every time you train a dog that way. So you say, come, your dog runs across the yard. They're all excited. They're focused on you. You're all proud of your well-trained dog. You give them 1 treat. You're about to tell them what's coming next and why you called them in the first place. And they instantly look away. They check out. They look at the floor. They're sniffing around. They walk away because there's no reason to stay focused on you. They got their paycheck. It's 5 o'clock on Friday. It's time to clock out. So we don't do that. So we utilize something called a variable reward system where we keep changing the number of rewards almost each and every time. And we start at 2. Don't start at 1, start at 2, right? So an example of this would be sit, good, 1, 2, 3. Don't count out loud for your dog. I'm doing that for you. But sit, good, 1, 2, come, good, 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, good, 1, 2, 3. The varying happens with how many times you hand it to them. And that's a very important detail. If you hand your dog 1 piece of kibble and they inhale it, it's 1 reward. If you hand them 8 pieces of kibble and they inhale it, it's 1 reward. Whatever they're eating in that 1 gulp while they, swallow that food is 1 reward. So if your dog does a phenomenal job and you try to give them this phenomenal paycheck and there's 10 pieces of kibble and they just suck it all down, it's still 1 reward.
Denim, come. Good. Down. Good. Sit. Good. Down. Good. Free. Place. Good. Free.
Dogs are not greedy with the size of the reward. They're greedy with how many times they got rewarded. So we use a variable reward system because it's insanely efficient and the benefits are very powerful. So when you keep bouncing around, sometimes they get 2, sometimes they get 3, sometimes they get 4, 2, 3, 2, 2, 4, 3, 2. They have no idea what's coming. They have no idea when it's going to stop. So your dog would never check out after the first reward because there might be more coming. But even if they get 3 rewards, there might be more coming. So it dramatically increases focus. It dramatically increases engagement. It increases motivation, work ethic, drive. If you got paid that way, you would never go home. You would just work all day, right? So a variable reward system is incredibly powerful. Now, with those markers, good and yes is a lot more exciting than good because yes means they fully completed that command. So it should get a better reward. So what we do is for good, we'll give 2 or 3 rewards. And for yes, we'll give 3, 4, 5, right? You do want to make sure that you're not giving so many pieces of food in one handful that they can't easily take it in one bite. If they're biting and biting and biting, this is way too much. It's also going to significantly slow down your training. You also don't want to be handing them that much food because after a few reps of taking one bite and food falls on the floor, so now they have to search around and pick it up, you're going to hand your dog food and they will check out and search the floor. You hand them food, they check out even when you're not dropping it. So if you're making a mess because you're giving too much food, give less. Right? You don't need to be handing handfuls, but it is okay to hand multiple pieces at once. Just do it multiple times. So you could have a whole bowl of kibble and sit good. 5 pieces, 6 pieces, 2 pieces. They're not counting what that totaled out to be. They just think they got paid 3 different times, which was amazing. So to quickly go through our markers, good is your duration marker, yes is your terminal marker, free is your release marker, no, which we're not using right now, is your negative marker, right? Every command you give your dog, you should be marking to let them know whether that was good or bad, right or wrong. If you are using your terminal marker, you are always rewarding that because part of that marker means to come to you to get that reward. If you are using your duration marker, whether or not you reward that is more situational. So he's just kind of relaxed in a place command. He doesn't really have any direction on he has to do this, has to do that. He just knows he's not supposed to get off, right? 0. Shti. Good. Keeping him in a stand. Platz. Good. Which means to stay in a down, right? But if I want to reward each one of these, I can. Shti. Good. Using that variable reward system. Platz. Good. But if I'm also using my duration marker to build up the duration to get to the terminal marker, then I can just keep reinforcing it until I get that explosive reaction with the terminal marker. Shti. Good. Platz. Good. So I can keep him here because that's what good means. Good keeps him there. Good keeps him there. Yes. And he explodes over to me. So, Stegen. Good. Good boy. So if I say good, he should just keep doing any command that he's doing, any behavior he's doing. If I say yes, he explodes over and I reward him for it, right? Stegen. The release marker, Stegen. If I want to release him, good. Free. And he's free to go. Now, obviously, he was free to go get that reward too. Stegen. Good. But you should mark every single command you give your dog, even if you're not going to reward every single one of them. 0. Safe. Good. Fuss. Good. Stegen. Good. Platz. Good. Shti. Good. Platz. Good. Shti. Yes. Safe. Good. Stegen. Good. Make sense? Timing is by far the most important detail of all of this. It is also by far the most difficult to master. Nobody has good timing in the beginning. Nobody's going to have perfect timing. You are going to make mistakes with this, so it is incredibly important that you take this part very, very seriously. One of the most common beliefs in dog training is that if you want your dog to be good at something, they need to do it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. This is absolutely ridiculous and wildly inaccurate. If you are doing a good job, you don't need to do that. If you're doing a really good job and the dog is having fun, they could learn it in a couple dozen reps. If you're doing a very monotonous, boring job, but it's accurate, after 200 to 400 reps, it creates a new synapse in the brain. That dog's going to know it forever. So it certainly doesn't take 8,000 repetitions to be good at something. You did not have to tie your shoes 10,000 times to be good at it. You probably successfully tied them about 30 times and you were pretty good at it for the rest of your life. So the reason why people believe that it takes thousands and thousands of reps is because it actually did take them thousands of reps for the dog to be good at it, simply because their timing was off. If their timing was on point, the dog would have been trained dramatically faster than it was. And you should be working smarter, not harder. We worked really hard with your dog, so you don't have to. So when you're taking this dog home and working with him every day, you're not supposed to be working really hard. You're supposed to be working consistently and intelligently, which should be a lot easier, right? So as far as timing goes, what you're always taught is you need to rush the reward them as fast as possible. So if you get it to them fast enough, now the dog knows why they got it. But the point of the marker is that it marks the behavior you're rewarding them for. So whatever your dog was doing when you said the word good, that's what you thought was good. That's what you're giving them food for. Whatever they were doing when you said the word no, that's the behavior that you specifically marked as something bad or negative or unwanted, and that's why they got corrected, right? The marker tells them why they got the food. The food doesn't tell them why they got the food. So again, whatever they are doing when you say good, that's what you are telling them that they are good at. That's what you are telling them they got rewarded for. So what most people do, because they're in a rush, they're in a hurry, they say sit, the dog sits, they hand them food as fast as they can, and as the dog is eating, they say, good boy. So you're marking the behavior of eating, not sitting. You said good when the dog was eating the reward. So now the dog thinks they're good at eating the food that they got for the way that they eat the food that they got for the way that they eat and it doesn't make any sense. So the dog didn't learn sit. You didn't positively reinforce the right behavior because your marker timing was a second off or 2 seconds off. But scientifically speaking, you have 0.6 to 1.2 seconds to mark a behavior. So you might as well just view it as you have less than a second. Right? And treat it like you have less than a second. So you should not be rushing the reward. You should be rushing the marker. You should be rushing the word good, the word yes, the word no. If your dog jumps on the couch and you walk over and you get them off the couch and then say no, you're getting mad and marking the behavior of getting off the couch as something bad. So if your dog's really smart, they now know you don't like when they get off the couch. So the next time you go to get them off the couch, they resist. Because you mark getting off as a negative behavior, right? If when you say down, they lay down, you hand them food, and as they're swallowing it, you say good, that dog certainly doesn't know that you like the way they laid down. So your marker timing has to be right at the moment where the dog did what they were supposed to do, or the dog did what they weren't supposed to do. Timing is absolutely everything. Rush your marker, not the reward. You have several seconds after your marker to correct them properly or reward them properly. So if I have food in my hand, good, then move. Good, then move, right? If I don't have the leash in my hand and the dog jumps up on the counter, no, then go get the leash and correct your dog properly and appropriately. But don't run over, grab the leash, then say no. You also don't need to yell these markers. You don't need to yell at all. Say it calmly, say it like you mean it, say it in a distinct way, and then proceed with what's coming next, whether that's the reward or the correction. But the timing has to be focused more on the marker, you have several seconds afterwards to reward them. So if you use a treat pouch, like we often do and strongly recommend, a big habit that people get into is the dog sits, and they start fumbling around for a while in that treat pouch to make sure they get a piece of food ready before they say the word good. And the dog's staring at that hand, staring at the treat pouch, staring at the food. Good. And then they hand it to them. So the dog's not being rewarded for sitting anymore. They're being rewarded for staring at you fumbling around for food. So it should have been sit, good, then reach in there, fumble around, get a piece of food and give it to them.
Sit. Good.
Right? You don't have to rush that part. I'm drilling this in because it is the hardest thing to master. As humans, we are very compulsive, neurotic animals, and everybody's rushing, even when no one taught them to do that. It's a very weirdly natural thing to do. So you have to make sure you are marking before you even move. So when it comes to that eye contact, when are you supposed to mark? When the dog makes eye contact, right? But if you start moving first, you won't be marking eye contact anymore. If I have my hand over here and your dog looks at me and I move my hand, they'll look back at my hand. Every time. Nothing is more distracting or attractive to a dog than whatever's moving. So they look at you, you move a little bit, they look at your hand. They look at your hand, they look at your hand, they look at... So if you say, watch me, and your dog looks at you and you start to move, good. Start to move, good. Start to move, good. If you move before you said your marker, they will turn and look at your hand, good. Watch me, good. Watch me, good. Watch me, good. If you move first, you're telling them you like the way they look at your hands. So now, after, a dozen reps, you say, watch me, and your dog goes right to your hand because that's what you keep accidentally marking because you're moving too fast. So it's not specific enough to mark before you reward the dog. Mark before you even move to reward the dog, right? Good, and then reward them. Good, and then reward them. This is the first thing that we teach every single dog. It's also by far the most important thing that we teach every single dog, including our own dogs. No matter what your dog's issues were, no matter what your goals were, if you wanted a narcotics detection dog, a sport dog, your dog was aggressive, your dog's afraid of loud noises, we utilized eye contact as the biggest building block of the entire foundation of training in order to address those issues or goals. So to teach that, we utilize something called shaping. Now, shaping can mean and be a lot of different things, but for what we are referring to, shaping was when we were marking and rewarding what your dog did on their own, right? So if the dog were to sit on their own, good, and you reward them. Sit on their own, good, and you reward them. What it's doing is it's teaching the dog that sitting on their own is a really good thing and they get rewarded for it. And that might sound odd, but it's an insanely powerful tool that we use in training a lot of different behaviors. If you tell someone what to do and they go and do it, so you pay them, you positively reinforce their behavior of doing that on command. So they are now more likely to do that on command. But if you had rewarded them for doing it on their own, they're now more likely to do it on their own. So if a little kid who never cleans their room comes home one day and just randomly cleans their entire room, and you make a really big deal out of it and reward them and positively reinforce them going out of their way and taking the initiative to do that good thing on their own, they're now a lot more likely to clean their room without being told, right? So we use shaping a lot when working on eye contact with your dog. So the way that we initially taught this, the very first session that we ever did with them, is we sat down with the dog sitting down facing us, and we took a handful of food and we held it out and let them smell it and get in there, and they can almost get it. They're trying to lick it through our fingers and they're getting all excited, but we didn't give it to them, right? Now, if your waiter did this with your food, you would get pretty frustrated. And the dog got pretty frustrated too. They also got confused because normally if you're handing them food, you give it to them. But instead, they got really excited about the food and we just held it off to the side. Roughly here. We did not put the food in front of our faces, which is commonly done. We held it off to the side, parallel to our eye line and face, on purpose. We didn't start off way out here or moving. We made it nice and simple, right? So the dog is staring at that hand excitedly, intensely, confused, frustrated. We're giving them absolutely zero direction. We're not telling them what we want. We're not making kissy noises to get them to look at us. We're not saying their name. We're not saying watch me, which is the command that we used. I would strongly advise you not to use the word look for the same reason we don't use the word okay, because it is a very common word we say in conversation and we start sentences with it. So when you're walking down the street, look, they got a new, your dog's going to keep looking at you. And you're not going to mark it, reinforce it, nothing, and the command gets weaker, right? So we got them all excited about the food. We hold it off to the side, and the dog's staring at that food, and they want it. So because we're not giving them any direction, they have to make a decision on their own. But something that's very, very, very important to keep in mind, that besides us, besides humans, pretty much every animal out there operates decisions that they have to make in life with two choices. Fight or flight, A or B. That's it. Fight does not mean aggressively fighting. It just means they're working to get it, right? So if the ball goes under the couch and they're trying to get it, that's fight. And when they're like, it's not worth it, and they walk away, that's flight. Flight also doesn't mean they're running away in fear, right? But the dog gave up. They just gave up, right? So when faced with this dilemma of I want the food, and I don't know what to do, they only have A or B. Try to get it or give up. And that's what your dog did. So most dogs, especially if they're hungry, they have good food drive, puppies, they'll start jumping all over you, barking at you, pawing at you. Maybe they'll start going through the commands or tricks that they know. They sit, lay down, they start trying to offer their paws, but they're trying to get that food. Right? So as we're sitting there just holding it off to the side, the dog's jumping all over us and getting excited and freaking out, we're still not giving them any direction, but we're also not giving it to them. So working for it isn't working. Fighting for it isn't working. So eventually, most dogs will hit B once in a while and walk away. We got to get them refocused back on that food. They check out, they're distracted, refocus back on that food. They give up, they leave the room. We got to bring them back, and they just give up, right? But as that confusion and frustration is bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, eventually they have to really decide what to do. They have to make a definitive choice and pull the trigger. So as they're looking at that food and the frustration's bubbling up, I want it. All of a sudden, in this moment of pure frustration, purely because of frustration, your dog turns and looks at us. In this confused moment of what the good piece of food. And that first time it happens, doesn't really make any sense to the dog. They don't really know why we just marked and rewarded them looking at us in utter confusion and frustration. So they go back to looking at the food. The frustration's building, and all of a sudden, what do you want from good piece of food? And we reward them. It's also important to note, this is the only exercise we do not use variable rewards for. We only reward one time each. Variable rewards are very, very, very important for all of your basic commands like sit, down, come. But for this specifically, we're more focused on getting that rapid fire re-engagement, right? So the variable rewards for this exercise, you don't want to use. So the dog turns and looks at me, good, and I reward them. They go back to the hand. I want it. I don't know what to do. What do you want me to? Good piece of food. What the good piece of food? Tell me what the good piece. I don't know what good piece of food. And then eventually the light clicks on, right? Because that dog, in a moment of frustration, a moment of hunger, a moment of confusion, a moment of need, literally just turned to a completely different species of animal to get direction, guidance, permission, acceptance, approval, leadership. Your dog is turning to us going, hey, boss, obviously you're in charge of this situation, the food, me. What do I do? You have never done that in your entire life to someone who wasn't above you, to someone who didn't have the authority to lead the way and give you the direction that you're asking for.
Good. 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 Good.
So in that moment, when that dog turns to us, it's also a direct acknowledgement of your authority over them. So since everything is based on relationship and relationship dictates behavior, who's in charge if your dog is turning and literally requesting information and guidance and leadership and permission? We are. And when you go home and do it, you are. This is by far the most valuable and powerful exercise or behavior you will ever work on with them. Because it doesn't just completely change your relationship. It is teaching your dog that in a moment of need, frustration, confusion, danger, in a moment of indecision, turn to you, turn to us, turn to their leader, turn to their handler, and get the direction and guidance that you need, because you're not supposed to be making that decision. You're not in charge. You did this as a kid. As long as you were raised remotely well, everybody turns to their parents when they need something. Right? When you're a child, everything you do starts with, Mom, can I? Mom, can I? Mom, can? You go to them when you're scared, when you're hungry, when you want to play, when you need permission to do anything. If you're walking down the street with your dad and you get really scared, you don't run over and attack whatever that is that scared you, like a lot of dogs do when you're walking down the street. You cling to your dad or your mom or whoever you're walking with, because obviously they're in charge. So whatever that problem is, they need to handle it. So dogs that are reactive and aggressive and are leaving you to go fight another dog on the other side of the street, they're doing it because they think they're in charge. This is teaching them that if you think that's a problem, go to me and I will fix it. So the dog sees that dog and they're looking at that dog like, this is the number one most important thing in the world. There's a serious problem. I'm in charge. I need to handle it. I need to fix it. And then they look at you. Good. And that problem goes down a little bit. Good. 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 Well, forget the dog. Good, 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 good. Because when you're working on eye contact and you're rewarding your dog for literally turning away from the problem and going to you for direction, you're not just reinforcing eye contact. You're reinforcing the concept that in a moment of need, turn to me. I will keep you safe. I will protect you. I will get you through it. And we'll have a really good positive experience in the process. So you also counter condition their behaviors. So if they used to get scared of loud trucks going by, and you work on eye contact around loud trucks, now all of a sudden they're pretty exciting to walk past. Because when they walk past these, I just ignore it. I focus on my mom, my dad, my leader, my boss. And not only does the problem go away, we have a party as we walk right by it. If we did this with you and you're scared of spiders or clowns, I could counter condition your fear too. I could counter condition your response when you see these things that stimulate that negative emotion inside you. That's what we're doing with the dog. So this eye contact is what we use to neutralize them to things that they're aggressive towards, things that they're scared of, things that they're way too excited about. So if your dog gets way too excited when your sister comes over to visit, then you should be working on eye contact around her, because it's going to teach your dog that I know you think she's really exciting, but I'm way more exciting, way more valuable, way more reinforcing. I know you think that dog barking at you is scary, it's a threat, it's a problem, you need to handle it. But if you go to me, I will fix it. I will handle it. It neutralizes them to all of these problems. So it should be the number one thing you work on when this dog goes home, because it was absolutely the number one thing that we worked on while they were with us. If you looked at a pie chart of all the things that we worked on with your dog, and we taught them a lot of different things. We worked on a lot of different things. We gave them a high level of obedience and cleaned up a bunch of behavioral issues, but still the majority of that pie would be eye contact, because nothing will ever outweigh how valuable and how powerful this really is.